hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The words of a nation, breathed to life in their most famous document, the Declaration of Independence. Join me as we explore how the citizens of the new American nation received the news of independence in the summer of 1776. To understand the Declaration of Independence, we must first explore the causes that led the 13 colonies to separate from Great Britain. The 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War, was a conflict between Britain and France. They fought for control over territories throughout the world, but most notably throughout North America. Beginning in 1754, a small expedition led by a young colonial officer named George Washington skirmished with French soldiers in the Ohio River Valley. Washington's actions in the campaign triggered further British military involvement. The French, allied with the majority of the region's Native Americans, held the interior of North America and regions of Canada. British campaigns against French holdings first began along the Ohio River. By 1759, British troops had captured the French stronghold of Quebec. By the war's end in 1763, a victorious British Empire was celebrating its territories taken from the French. British Parliament felt that a war to support the American colonies should be paid for by the colonies, and so, over the next decade, Great Britain would lay upon the colonists a series of laws, taxes, and tariffs that would drive the colonists to eventually break the bonds between the two. The first law, enacted, was a proclamation by Britain's King George III, who had ascended the throne 3 years earlier in 1760. Known as the Royal Proclamation Line of 1763, the boundary prevented colonial settlement from territory west of the Appalachians. The aim was to keep colonists from fighting with natives in the unsettled territories. But settlers moving west disregarded the order, and colonists became resentful over the control the king felt he could demonstrate from afar. Parliament, now under the guidance of Prime Minister George Grenville, continued to force laws and passages onto the colonies. The Sugar Act of 1764 cracked down on smuggling and tried smugglers in special courts. The most notorious law was the Stamp Act of 1765, forcing all legal documents, newspapers, and letters to require a purchase stamp. The act caused colonists to rise up in protest and outrage. The Declaratory Acts of 1766, British Parliament declared that they could pass whatever laws they chose, and that taxation in the colonies was not without representation, as the colonies had believed. In 1770, tensions flared, and British soldiers fired on rowdy colonists in Boston in an engagement known as the Boston Massacre. The Tea Act of 1773 created a monopoly for the East India Company selling tea in North America. In December of 1773, patriots known as the Sons of Liberty boarded 3 ships and poured over 300 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, in an event later called the Boston Tea Party. Colonial patience had run out. Separation was becoming a reality. Assembled in 1774, the First Continental Congress met in Philadelphia to discuss concerted reactions against the British. They discussed the realities of reconciliation with Great Britain and recessed, praying that peace would last. But peace would not last. The shots heard round the world. American Minutemen fire on British soldiers in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, in April of 1775. The American Revolution had begun. By June of 1775, The British had defeated Patriots at Bunker Hill in Boston, but not before suffering over 1,000 casualties. Assembled in 1775 and 76 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Second Continental Congress was now responsible for a nation at war. Certain delegates still wanted reconciliation with Britain, but a spirit of independence, led by John Adams of Massachusetts, had swept the Congress in the summer of '76. A committee was now formed to draft the Declaration of Independence. John Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and 2 other delegates presented the draft to Congress on July 2nd, and on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was ratified by the delegates. Congress's next step would be to inform all American citizens the bonds had been broken. By the evening of July 4th, John Dunlap, a local Philadelphia printer, began turning out broadsides of the Declaration to give to express riders for distribution throughout the states. The first public reading of the Declaration was in Philadelphia at the State House on July 8, 1776. Met with general applause and heartfelt satisfaction, John Adams remembered a great crowd of people, troops on parade, bells ringing day and night. On July 9th, the Declaration was read by General George Washington and his aide to troops of the Continental Army occupying New York City. That evening, a statue of King George III was torn down by local citizens. The statue's lead was later turned into bullets for Continental soldiers. Not every reception was met with celebration. In New York Harbor, Ambrose Surley, Secretary to Lord Admiral Howe, recalls the staff's reception of the document.
The Congress have at length thought it convenient to throw off the mask. Their Declaration of the 4th of July, while it avows their right to independence, is founded upon such reasons only as prove that independence to have been their object from the beginning. A more impudent, false, and atrocious proclamation was never fabricated by the hands of man. Without horror at the daring hypocrisy of these men, who call God to witness the uprightness of their proceedings, nor without indignation at the low and scurrilous pretenses by which they attempt to justify themselves.
The Declaration was proclaimed in Providence, Rhode Island on July 18th, and in Newport, Rhode Island on July 20th. In Newport, 13 cannons were fired, while the local brigade paraded through the city. Governor Nicholas Cook reported to Congress that the proclamation was received with joy and applause by all ranks. On July 18th, the Declaration was read to the citizens of Boston. Abigail Adams, writing to her husband John Adams, recalled the events of that day.
Last Thursday, after hearing a very good sermon, I went with the multitude into King Street to hear the proclamation for independence read and proclaimed. Some field pieces with the train were brought there. The troops appeared under arms, and all the inhabitants assembled there. When Colonel Crofts read from the balcona of the State House the proclamation, great attention was given to every word. As soon as he ended, the cry from the balcona was, "God save our American states." The bells rang, the privateers fired. Thus ends royal authority in this state, and all the people shall say, Amen.
On July 13th, the Declaration had arrived in Baltimore, Maryland. Immediately, copies were printed and forwarded to each county and province in the state to be read aloud to the inhabitants. The Declaration was proclaimed in Richmond, Virginia on August 5th, 1776. John Page, president of the Virginia Council, remembered that upwards of 200 militia assembled for the grand occasion. That evening, over 1,000 Virginians were present at a celebration. Toasts were made to support the cause with their lives and fortune. And in Halifax, North Carolina, the Declaration was announced on August 1st to an immense crowd of citizens and provincial troops who swore by their united acclamations to consummate the deed. Sent on by express, the Declaration arrived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was read to the people on August 5th. Assembled around the Liberty Tree, a popular gathering place for revolutionary ideas over the past decade, the citizens, both young and old, heard the declaration proclaimed to them. Henry Drayton wrote in his memoirs that the ceremony was the most splendid and solemn that had ever been witnessed in South Carolina. And in Savannah, Georgia, the declaration was read on August 10th to a great concourse of people. And so, in a span of just over 30 days, the Declaration of Independence had been proclaimed in every state of the new republic. The spectacular reception of the document by its citizens contained a hope for the life, liberty, and success of the United States. 5 years later, in 1781, British General Lord Cornwallis would surrender his forces to General Washington at Yorktown, Virginia. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris would be signed, thereby ending the war between the United States and Great Britain. And in 1788, the Constitution would be adopted. July 4th is our Independence Day. Celebrated across the nation with fireworks and festivities, we are taken back to the earliest days of our republic, when the founders pledged their lives, fortune, and sacred honor in defense of the idea that all men are created equal. May we strive to always continue that proposition.
Ever again divine. And you know, when I was in school, we used to sing it something like this. Listen here. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties,